World IVF Day, observed to celebrate the birthday of Louise Brown, the first human baby created in a test tube outside a mother's womb. Her birth set the ball rolling for one of the biggest scientific achievements of the human race that in 4 decades and over 7 million babies have become the most reliable ray of hope for millions of childless couples around the world. Infertility is gripping not only India but the world at large, so much so that the World Health Organization has recognized it as a global public health issue. In addition to infertility causing medical conditions or disabilities, rising pollution levels, unavoidable occupational hazards, or poor lifestyle have only increased the number of couples who unsuccessfully try to become parents by natural means. They were forced to silently suffer the ignominy of being childless in a society where one's social standing is decided by such aspects of life. IVF has emerged as one of the most reliable solutions to this problem, but at the same time, it is viewed as something that only rich can afford. There is a need to bring down IVF from that ivory tower so that more and more couples can benefit from it. At the same time, a well-defined regulatory framework can ensure qualified people can help these couples who are in distress. In India, the home to about 30 million infertile couples, where do we stand? To discuss this and the other aspects, we have an esteemed panel of specialists today with us. And let me start with welcoming our guests for today's summit. And I welcome Dr. Prakash Trivedi, President of Indian Society of Assisted Reproduction. ISAR works towards promoting advancements, collaborations, awareness, and ethical practices in the area of assisted reproduction technologies. We have Dr. Rishikesh Pai, Medical Director of Bloom IVF with us today. Dr. Pai is a highly respected name in the field of gynecology and obstetrics. We also have Dr. Neena Malhotra. She is the professor of ART Center, Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology, All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi. We also have with us Mr. Sanjeev Nawangul, CEO of Bharat Serums and Vaccines Limited. The company is in news for conducting phase 3 clinical trials on coronavirus patients suffering from mild to moderate acute respiratory distress syndrome. However, the company also has an impressive gynecology and ART portfolio that helps both men and women suffering from infertility with the medicine that help them address this problem. We also have Dr. Narendra Malhotra with us. We will be having this discussion with him also. He is also our esteemed panelist in our upcoming sessions during the day. So before much delay, I would begin my discussion today to understand how IVF holds the hope for these nearly 30 million couples. So let me begin with Dr. Rishikesh Pai with you. Dr. Pai, you have been a leading gynecologist and have been leading the cause of IVF in this country for decades now. You are also trying to work and have been associated with institutions like FOGSI, ISAR, and have always been trying to increase the women health outcomes in the country. And many of these gynecologists like you are the first people who actually diagnose or understand that the couple is suffering or somebody is suffering from infertility. What is this overall problem in our country? How many people, as we know the number, but is it the number which is actually there, or it is much larger and we don't know only that much number? How do you see the overall prevalence of growing infertility in our country in both women and men?
So thank you for first of all calling me here, and there's all my esteemed friends and Dr. Prakash, our president of ISA, Dr. Malhotra is there, Dr. Sanjeev, Nina, he represent one of the leading institutes of medicine in our country. So these are all very important people, and I'm very privileged to be with them. So I started IVF in 1989. I joined. I was actually Dr. Indira Hinduja's houseman when she had the first IVF baby in KM Hospital way back in 1984, 85. And then because of her inspiration, I went to Australia in 89 and started IVF in 1991. That time there were about 10 of us all over India who started the IVF movement. And now the movement has grown to nearly 3,500 IVF centers. So the movement has really grown. If you look at the number of couples, in the reproductive age group, Nina would be more accurate in her, but my guesstimate would be if we are 1.3 billion people, so around, let's say 300 million couples are in the reproductive age group. So 10% of them are infertile. So about 30 to 40 million couples in India are infertile and they need treatment. So 10% of these need IVF. You don't need, first of all, there is a misconception. So you don't need that all of them need IVF. About 80 to 90% people will achieve pregnancy with simpler methods. Laparoscopy is now widely prevalent, and ovulation induction methods, correction of pathology, all that, de-stressing, all that most of them will get pregnant. Only 10% need the IVF treatment as such. And over the years initially when we started IVF, the results were 5%. Now they have gone to 30 to 50%. So there has been an increase in the pregnancy rates over the years. Almost 1% increase of pregnancy rate has been there since 30 years. Since I started, when it was around 10%, now it has reached 30 to 40% live birth rate per started cycle. So there has been a lot of growth. And in terms of, let's look at the urban-rural divide. If you look at the causes, I feel that more the rural people and the not so well-off people in our country, their problems of infertility are more to deal with infection, etc., etc. While the people at the upper level, their problems are more to deal with other lifestyle problems like fibroids, endometriosis, getting married at a later stage, so there are divergent etiologies that are playing at the same time. And at the same time, fortunately for us, the government has also been very proactive. All India Institute, for example, gives IVF in, I think, 50,000 or whatever, or free, I think it gives it. So we have got government institutes also that are coming up. So overall, I'm feeling happy that over the last 30 years, the movement has evolved in a very good fashion, and more people are entering the field, providing service. And the market, you don't have to bother, but automatically the market has played it in such a way that the cost of price has also started falling down. More access is there all over the country. So overall, the movement is going in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rishikesh, for bringing this up. So you are saying that around 30 to 40 million people are there who may be suffering from infertility, but all of them don't require IVF as such. Let me go to Dr. Trivedi on this. And Dr. Trivedi, so this number seems to be a massive number. And, there may be also other people who might have not been reported or diagnosed for this. What are the solutions, apart from, as Dr. Rishikesh said, that IVF is only for, let's say, 10% of them. So what are the other solutions available for these, couples, and especially in the area of assisted reproduction, the institution which you are, heading, and the association which you lead? What are the other these options available to reduce the suffering of these couples?
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be in IHW Council and BSV meeting with great friends. Now we have to remember there are many problems of women. For example, nobody dies of infertility. Nobody dies of urinary incontinence. But the desire to procreate is the fundamental human right, whether you're rich, poor, educated, or less educated. And as Rishikesh was trying to mention, there is a definite rise in the proportion number of people having infertility. For example, if we see in urban area, more and more people are focused to their profession, work, a little late marriage, quite a few do develop endometriosis, somebody has fibroids. Overall, globally, the sperm count has gone down. We all say that we are in hyper-estrogenic atmosphere. So sperm counts have gone down, male sexual dysfunctions have increased, infections have increased, and there are many other causes wherein early pregnancy loss which are unnoticed. So the problem is huge. And if you see a TV serial, when somebody is pregnant, the whole family is pregnant. And when there is abortion, the entire house is an abortion. So there are many, this is the only aspect wherein apart from the couple, there are many other surrounding people are involved. Now the things have evolved and made things better because we have better equipments nowadays as far as imaging is concerned. We have better blood parameters, better diagnostic modality, better medias, better method of treatment, better evaluation. So IVF that way becomes a very regular mathematics. But as Rishikesh rightly pointed out, a large number of patients will conceive by properly listening to the couple, paying attention to the history, having a systematic workup, and then delivering them a child which may be by spontaneous method, by simpler method. So there will be certain group of patients who will definitely need an IVF. For example, somebody has tuberculosis of the endometrium, or the tubes are blocked, or the male count is, say, for example, 0. And though the person is producing sperm from the testes. So there are plenty of indications which are increasing as far as use of assisted reproductive techniques are concerned. And as Rishikesh rightly pointed out, when it started, there were few. Now there are many. Now when there are many, there is a little bit of dilutional effect of quality. And that is what we have to try and understand, that everybody has to match to get about 30% success in different types of treatment. A simple IUI type of treatment may at the most give you 12%. So you have to give a realistic expectation to the couple, proper hearing to them, understanding, explaining what you're planning to do. The more the patient stays with you, there are more chances. So you always give them a time that, this is the time it will take. Don't be in a hurry. For example, somebody is 32, you're not worried that much. But somebody is 39, then you will tell, okay, we don't want to wait long. So each couples are different, and you remember that they've gone through many ART consultants. Simple infertility practitioner, ART consultant. So you should count that you are the last hope and handle from there onwards, but give a result, or wherever necessary, guide them properly.
Thank you so much, Dr. Trivedi. May I also ask, you mentioned about that we have seen I think a massive expansion of the number of clinics which we have around us, or the practitioners around us. But at the same time, as I mentioned, if you talk to most of the people will feel that IVF is not for common people. It is for those, because it's very expensive, and then the cost. And when we talk in the media circles also, the same kind of input comes from them as well. What do you feel about that? Are we able to bring in that important intervention to the reach of larger masses also, or it is, despite so much of expansion, it is still limited to for some privileged?
You have rightly pointed out, when we started in 1990s, the first batch we had a twins, and that person was a peanut seller. Means he had bad tuberculosis. I don't think so that the less affording don't desire. You have to work out that whatever is your package, you will modify for the less affording people. And in ESAR, there are two important things. ESAR itself has a zone wherein free IVF can be done from any of the ESAR recognized center. So there are funds donated by pioneering IVF consultants to develop this and give these services free. Whether it's Rishikesh, me, Narendra, anybody else, we ourselves, we have our own parents' charity, wherein The entire, yesterday, in fact, we did a transfer in a patient wherein we had taken no charge. But let's come to the ground reality. A patient who cannot afford is afraid to step in a good clinic. So that is one important area. A patient who is affording, rich and educated, sometimes they're very impatient, because they see the net, this, that and all, and they feel, XC, I know everything, result, I know everything, this, that, etc. So what happens is, you need a couple who listens to the specialist step by step how they have to go and follow. Because if they're not going to do in that fashion, if they are in super hurry, so we always say that 3 or 4 out of 10 will conceive in IVF. When you're talking about IUI, it is less success, but it is a treatment which has given thousands of conception. So rich patient, the other thing is, it is like, why cardiac surgery is costly. I'm asking you a question. That is because your pocket is close to the heart. So cardiac surgery is costly. Now what happens in IVF, because it is IVF, gonadotropins are costly, disposables are costly. So unlike endoscopy, wherein if you have invested one, it's only your talent which is useful. So there is certain amount of cost which always takes place. Then you go to a corporate setup. Now corporate setup, what happens is, apart from all this expense, a certain percentage only goes to the doctor. So it is all depending on institute person, but the whole branch of IVF is actually run through commitment, passion, and delivering. And India is doing phenomenally well. What I emphasize, which was very important, because in any corner or anybody who is having certain amount of money opens up an IVF center with not necessarily as much talent as is needed. So what we prefer from ISAR and any other organization, Foxy and all, that the centers should have higher level of fertility treatment, whether IVF or otherwise, and make it available to the so-called consumer at a price at which they can afford.
That's important point. And Dr. Trivedi, the case study which you are mentioning about the first case which you did about peanut seller, that gives a big message that as far as any disease, or be it infertility as well, concerned, it does not discriminate between rich or poor. So let me go to Dr. Neena on this. And Dr. Neena, you are heading this ART practices in the country's largest public hospital. And as Dr. Trivedi also highlighted, infertility, I'm sure it does not discriminate between rich or poor, or somebody living in a metro or in a small village. Actually, our poor may be more exposed to those environmental and occupational hazards that lead to this infertility. And another problem is that they are also the people who see the worst of social stigma if not able to give birth to a child, because in an educated environment, it is possible that people may accept it in a better manner. But in the segments they belong to, it may be a big issue for them. What is your experience, with these kind of couples? Because I'm seeing you maybe, seeing so many of them in your hospital. And how justifiable it is to look at IVF as the indulgence of rich, which is definitely a case, because what we read and what we see predominantly is about which celebrity got IVF and why did they got IVF, and they got IVF because they did not want to carry the burden of the gestation for 9 months, or those stories comes which put IVF in a very, very different segment. How do you see these the plight of these couple, and what need to be done to ensure that the fruits of this scientific marvel to reach to these people as well? Dr. Neena.
Thank you, Kamal. Thank you so much for having me here. I think I'm feeling privileged to, talk and share a platform with such stalwarts from across the country. And I'm humbled to say, yes, I work in a public funded IVF unit, which is, I would say, has volumes of patients. I think as Dr. Prakash and Dr. Rishikesh Pai said that, to create and procreate is a basic need of mankind. So it's not, I would not say IVF is an indulgence. It is a necessity. If the lady has blocked tubes, and I think we cannot say that it'll be the panacea for a rich, I mean, it's the end of getting everybody a baby. But I think a justification is there for an IVF, even for a poor. That's what I think, because her needs, her social needs, her psychological needs have to be seen in par with somebody who can afford maybe 10 IVFs. But yes, I would say my clientele is definitely different from what my seniors and my colleagues would see. They are the ones who may not be able to find money. And I would humbly say that we still charge, we don't do in free IVF, but we charge an IVF which is all comprehensive of just 60,000 rupees. But trust me, Kamal, I would share that, to even fend themselves at 60,000 is a lifetime, savings that they can. Most of them, who's probably working as a sweeper, he works as a dhobi, he works as a rickshaw puller or somebody, he's taking money on loan, he's borrowing it from his family, especially when there's a social stigma. It's shocking. The in-laws are not very nice. And this girl goes and, pesters her parents. So part of the dowry, or now at the age 10 years later in marriage, she will, beg it from her relatives. So I think we have to justify that social need. And I would say, as rightly said, that it's not the rich, of course, have access. They have access to diagnostic. They have access to treatment, laparoscopy, surgery. But we miss a larger segment who are in the rural. But I would say, thanks to the digital awareness, the smartphones, there are many more who would have not reached us, thanks to the, evolution that we've seen the last 10 years. But what's very important is that I would say we still have hope. We could sort of get those patients come to us, even if they're spending that money earlier to us. By the time she's reaching me, and most of them to my center come from UP, Bihar, all those kind of areas where they've actually exhausted all their resources, but still we were able to do justice to them, give them a pregnancy rates of close to 30-35% in some of the promising young couples. But yes, I would say that the needs are equally for a poor and for a rich, and we have to work towards working on making IVF more available and more accessible. And maybe I can't say make it low cost. It can't be low cost. The consumables can't go low. The gonadotrophins can't go low. But perhaps if the infrastructure comes in some hospitals, like public funded hospitals, then the cost can be taken care of. So that is what I would take as a suggestion. And there are a lot of ways where we can say, as Dr. Rishikesh rightly said, just 10-12% or maybe 10-15% would need IVF. What about the larger 80-85% who can be treated by things other than? So can we look at low-cost diagnostics for them, particularly in our rural? And before I started, I looked up the beautiful infrastructure of the sub-centers and the PHCs. I was happy to read that there are many sub-centers which are upgraded to health and wellness centers. By the time a man realizes he's azoospermic, the woman is already 40. So could those wellness centers do some good to us? At least they could talk. I'm doing a community-based field project on the epidemiology of PCOS, where we go to the urban slums and also to the rurals, and you'd be surprised. The Anganwadi workers knows everything about iron and calcium to a pregnant woman. She doesn't know how to talk to an infertile couple. So are we not missing such a big opportunity, a window opportunity where these health workers can be used to identify and get these women earlier to us, where we could give them even simple treatments like IUI early? So my take would be, yes, IVF is, but it's not the end, and it's not the panacea to treat every infertile couple, and we could do simpler things. So yes, but then we have to look, of course, beyond the rich. Then I'm happy to hear Dr. Prakash sharing the very nice initiative where they're even supporting and funding. And I think if we have our rich patients or patients who have had a baby from us come and support, even in public hospitals and in private, I'm sure we can give IVF facility and the privilege and the pleasure of parenthood to many, many more poor couples as well. So some initiatives like this could be useful.
Thank you so much, Dr. Malhotra. You highlighted very well, and that I'm sure that being at AIIMS, which is I think one place where the people from across the country come seeking the best of the treatments, and most of them are those who cannot afford this treatment anywhere else. And you are helping them. This is definitely a wonderful thing. You highlighted important aspects that why we are not looking at infertility as a problem which need to be addressed, and I think that's where we are missing on the point here. So let me go to Mr. Nawangul on this. Mr. Nawangul, like many other non-communicable diseases, infertility too has now taken a magnitude of almost an epidemic in our country. But despite this, affects to almost as many people as those suffering from cardiovascular disease. We don't talk about infertility that much, as Dr. Nina also said that even the healthcare workers who are going to these underprivileged areas or on a primary care level, we don't know how to talk to an infertile couple and how to how we can diagnose that on time. What do you see that why we are not able to give that kind of either a focus or a priority on infertility as received by many other diseases? And infertility may also be a major contributor to several other problems, including those of mental health, social structure, women welfare, and even many times a cause of poverty also. As Dr. Nina said that they are able to provide IVF treatment all inclusive in 60,000 rupees, but for many, and most of them have already kind of ran out of their resources seeking help for this. So how do you see this? And also as an industry player, do you see it as a case of misplaced priorities, or there a way to make IVF more accessible, affordable, or not only IVF, the whole infertility care?
Good morning, everyone, and thanks, Kamal, for inviting me. And I feel very privileged to sit with real experts who have done yeoman service to the couples of this country for so many years. So let me tackle this on two fronts. I think one front is on this as being treated as something which, if you compare it with non-communicable diseases, what happens and how do you really understand what happens in such diseases and what needs to be done. And second is on the whole question on the treatment costs and everything. So let me tackle both this separately. Firstly, I think, look, I have, and Kamal, you know that I have had tremendous experience in making significant contribution in diabetes and in tuberculosis. And I've seen non-communicable diseases very, very deeply in this country. And I've worked really hard to ensure that some priority is given. And now I see the fruits of my labor in tuberculosis. It has become like a social movement now in the country. So I see when you say that why it is not treated like cardiovascular diseases, I see differences in what happens with these diseases, which are even more acute in cardiovascular or diabetes compared to those diseases. You look at the connection, and I would really want to work on this and do a study with experts on what is the connection of infertility with social stigma, depression, abuse, suicides, divorces, poverty, and so many other social ills that we come across to find out what is the social cost of the disease. Like the study we did to find out in diabetes and cardiovascular diseases that it lops off 1% GDP of the country every year. 1% GDP. I'm sure infertility has significant impact on GDP and significant impact on social costs of this country. But if we don't do that study as a whole, I don't think people are going to wake up and realize, and it will be left to doctors who are doing tremendous work to solve the problem, and some part of the industry which is trying to solve some part of the problem. So let us actually work together to find out the social costs of this disease. We will need different stakeholders. Like we had for tuberculosis, we need different stakeholders. We need NGOs, we need activists, we need really, multilateral agencies, we need insurance companies, we need, some government arms to really work on how to understand this disease, this situation a little bit better and not call it a disease. It is, first of all, we saying this is, comparing it with any other disease creates stigma of it. This is not a disease. This is something that we need to do to ensure that couples really enjoy the fruits of what what is their basic need of procreation. So we need to start thinking in those terms, and that will help us. We also need to also realize that our counseling techniques go some way. We have some successes with couples having birth, 30, 40, 50%. And the rest 50% are still left without any result. How do we counsel failure? That's another big social issue that we need to handle. So as an industry, as everybody together in this, we start to now raise the bar of discussing these issues at a much higher level. Think about it in a much bigger framework, and that will help us. Why can't insurance companies reimburse fertility? What is the big issue? Or can we discuss with government what kind of reimbursement should work on it? We are trying to now work on what can become a pioneering effort in microfinance in this country, and really see what can we do as a company to really enhance affordability in a different fashion. As it is, on one hand, we have done, and I feel proud that we are probably the only company in India which is completely indigenized manufacturing, and we are not dependent on other companies in this area on China. We have done completely, everything is done indigenously here. So we have been trying to find a way to reduce costs as much as possible. That's one action, but there is more to be done. I think the whole social issue of finding a way to create an understanding on social costs of this situation of infertility in this country needs to be done at a much, much higher plane. And I'm going to use this forum to only request experts and really pioneers in this field to help us work with this, and let us together find a way to really wake up everybody and say, these are the issues of this country which we need to tackle. Look, these are not simple things, and many other causes are there for depression. Many other causes are there for divorces, but this also contributes to some of those factors. This look at, and you ask any of the doctors here who have seen thousands of couples, they will tell you stories like nobody's business, and they will tell you really stories of how this has impacted relationships. These are very important social issues. We tend to ignore it by calling it like infertility is a disease and let's tackle it and leave it to doctors to treat it. This is not the way to deal with it. We have to be more responsible as a country, and let's actually do some effort towards it. So I think if you do that, then the noise that you see in cardiovascular diseases, the noise you see in diabetes, in oncology, you see noise in tuberculosis now, all that noise is helping the country. This also will help the country. That is what I feel, Kamal.
So thank you so much, Sanjeev ji. You are making very important point in terms of bringing all stakeholders, and not only medical stakeholders, everyone, all social, political stakeholders together to understand that what is the cost of this growing medical condition, or a condition, if I should avoid using or referring it as a disease. But what my purpose was to compare it, that when we see any other medical condition, be it diabetes or any other, when they get so much of priority, and I understand. See, there is one area where you see, as Dr. Trivedi also said, that nobody dies of infertility. But at the same time, there is also a possibility that people do die of infertility. As you said, that it can be a possible cause of suicide, it can be a possible cause of severe mental trauma or mental health, and anything, or maybe crime against women also.
True.
So there are those possibilities, and there are very, very stark possibilities. Let me go back to Dr. Hrishikesh Pai, and Dr. Hrishikesh Pai, as we are trying to understand that the infertility we are trying to see from the glasses of IVF. Definitely IVF is one space, and today being IVF day, and we are trying to understand that what all vilifies IVF. Why is it?
Kamal, before you ask me a question, because I wanted to talk to you about the financial part of it a little, if you allow me.
Sure. Okay,
so,
please.
Primarily, one is that there is a communication information problem. Like, for example, I'll get a phone call and say, sir, aapka IVF ka charge kya hai? Because I take a lot of phone calls myself. I say, but आपको IVF क्या प्रॉब्लम है आपको? नहीं मेरे को बच्चा नहीं हो रहा है। पर IVF क्यों पूछ रहे हैं आप IUI से 10,000 में प्रेग्नेंट हो सकते हैं, क्या प्रॉब्लम है? सो देयर इज अ कम्युनिकेशन गैप. एवरीवन थिंक्स दैट इनफर्टिलिटी यानी IVF करना पड़ेगा, IVF यानी 1 लाख रुपया है इसलिए गड़बड़ है. So that has to be broken. Communication has to be told to people. That's point number one. Second is the problem of waiting list. For example, the All India Institute, there is an army hospital. There are certain government hospitals which are there, but they have got 3 years of waiting list. They are inundated. Now, how many people they can take care of? So that's another problem. Unfortunately, there are 3,000 centers and they are all empty. My center, for example, I have 8 centers. I can do 800 cycles a month. I am doing 150 to 200 cycles a month. So my utilization, capacity utilization is useless. And mine, after so many years of practice, is capacity utilization down. What about the new centers? So we have got, I was just calculating, we have a 2.5 million capacity utilization which is available, and we are doing 300,000 patients. So there is a major capacity utilization total failure. Why is the failure? Because the majority of the 5% can go to this 2.5 million cycle utilization, and the 80-90% can't access it because of cost. So what government needs to do is needs to fund them. So they should be able to go to any IVF center recognized by government machinery like an ART bill, so that they can, government can say, I am going to pay from Ayushman Bharat 60,000 rupees. Will you do it? I'll say, sure, sir, please send me. My capacity is underutilized. I'm doing only 150 cycles when my capacity is to do 800 cycles. I will 100% do it at 60,000 rupees. There's not a problem at all. So that is the second thing which government needs to do. So public-private partnership. Why to create more infrastructure? Infrastructure is already there, but there is the well-off people are not enough to support that infrastructure. So that is an important point. So the fourth point which I want to tell you is that government funding, already NHS service they give it. In Europe, they are giving the funding to infertility. So there is already a precedent. Madhya Pradesh is giving funding, 60,000 rupees they give. Central government scheme gives, CGHS scheme gives funding. Some companies are giving funding. So we must say, then the fifth point is EMI. Already EMIs are available. There are every 2 days I get a phone call. Sir, हमारा company है, finance company है, हम EMI patient को दे सकते हैं. And at 2% loan processing fee, they are giving EMI now to patients. You just have to give the name of the patient and they just give the EMI to them. So the only problem with the EMI is that if the patient doesn't become pregnant, patient will curse you saying that, oh, doctor pai ke paas gaya, private patient pregnant nahi hua and मैं EMI भर रहा हूँ. So that's a big problem because in infertility, the success rate is not 100%. The success rate. So that's the next point. The other point I would like to say is that there is, so ultimately we need to have a public-private relationship in IVF, because unfortunately, whether we like it or not, if you look at all organizations, the ones that are successful and the ones that are well off, what is Amazon, Facebook, forget, Google, Ambani's, all of them are catering to numbers. Unless the number is there, the viability is not there. So the number with quality, if you can give the quality with the number, because with the number comes the quality and quantity are inversely proportional. So with the number, the quality may fall down. If we can achieve the quality and the quantity, and this is a malaise of the healthcare system in our country, that there is this disparity. Private hospitals are empty and the public hospitals are too full to take care of them. So then this needs to be normalized. This needs to be equalized by planners, by Ayushman Bharat people, that they have to accept this and equalize it. So that is how we can evolve it. For example, you know something, my cost of IVF is 30,000 rupees at present. I can give a cycle in 70,000 also. Not a problem. You send me the patient, I'll do it. Problem is the communication. Patient don't know that I can do a cycle at 70,000. Patient don't know that, yeah, because there is a disparity. Suppose you go to a Leelavati hospital where our clinic is. We have got a general ward. We have got and the pricings are based on the bed which you take, where you sit. This is a standard practice in all private hospitals. So you have already got a system in place. It's just the communication and acceptance by the government that yes, we have the private, big, huge amount of private practitioners that are available to us. And why not, like how Ayushman Bharat scheme is there, why not include IVF in it? In fact, I was thinking include the entire women healthcare system of women. Women comprise 50% because 2 years from now, I'll become the FOXI president. So I'm already thinking not only of infertility, but I'm thinking of the larger picture. The larger picture is how do you integrate services? It's a big challenge. If we can integrate services, if we can, you can equalize the facilities so that the facilities can be distributed. That is the key. And if I have to be the FOXI president, I don't want to become just a useless FOXI president. I want to leave a mark. I would like to people remember me that Dr. Pai did this equalization of service. And this is not a single thing. You need to have all multi-specialties come together with the government. Now with this COVID pandemic, what has happened? There is an understanding. People understand, government understand, public understand that private practitioners and government practitioners are all one. And we must look at it as an entire family. And we must, after this pandemic goes away, we must sit down together and find out a way wherein we can give the service, like NHS service, such a beautiful service is there. So if we can create that kind of service where 90% people can get access and 10% who want to pay for private, go to private practice. And that is the vision where everything will be nice.
No, thank you so much, Dr. Pai. Actually, you covered in your, my question was about to be on this only, that how we are going to, make sure that, or we are trying to make that it reaches to the, or it comes to the reach of the people. We are around 45 minutes of our discussion. So before we proceed further, I would also like to inform our viewers today that on this July 1 Doctors Day, ISW Council also started a petition to demand to the government of India to set up a gratitude memorial for all those doctors, medical workers, healthcare workers, and people affiliated with that who are helping us fight this pandemic on the forefront and are also many times making their supreme sacrifices in the process. So we are requesting the government of India to set up a memorial for these health guardians also, so that people of this country remember their contribution and also remember that health comes first. For this, you can go on our chat box. There is a link for change.org petition, and you can sign the petition over there. We got a overwhelming response from several lawmakers and ministers from different states and the government of India supporting this cause, and we are looking forward that sooner we will be able to see a memorial of this kind. So I'll go ahead with this discussion now, and Dr. Trivedi, as Dr. Pai highlighted and also highlighted by Mr. Navan and Dr. Neena, infertility solutions or IVF, which is for a lesser or a limited number of people who are suffering. But this is the need of all. It is not related to any, with your social status or your economic status. You, as a president of ILCR and as an organization, how do you look, try to make this happen that people are able to, get this within their reach? As Dr. Pai said, that we already have enough infrastructure available. The infrastructure is many times actually is becoming a cause of bad publicity for the whole industry, that we have so many of centers, and which is, also leading to a perception that IVF is a big business and that's why you should open as many centers as possible. That's a different aspect which Dr. Pai is bringing, that these centers are not, doing as much they are meant to do. So how do you take this agenda, and also keeping, in mind that how Mr. Nawangul suggests that there is a need of bringing together the entire ecosystem, all stakeholders to work with the maybe government, maybe the state governments, as if Madhya Pradesh can support IVF treatments or infertility treatments, Goa government can support. If as central government healthcare scheme can support, why not Ayushman Bharat, and why not the other 28 states of this country? So how do you take it forward, sir?
I think so. When I became president in Hyderabad, and the most important thing, I think so, we should understand. Yesterday at 3 o'clock, we had an ESAR Facebook page for patients, which is only wherein the patients will interact, patients are answered. Then we are going to have a website wherein only patients' aspects are discussed and solved. Now, there were two things when I became president, two agendas I had. I think Sanjeev, Kamal, and all of you can pay attention to. We were working with companies to build awareness program with our various state chapters, which is structured in a way wherein you are addressing patients only. So basically what happens is, like Rishikesh is telling, there may be 1 lakh patient needing IVF in Bombay, but they don't know where to go. Because they know, okay, if we go at X place, it will be costly. Now, even at our place, we have Dr. Trivedi's Parents Charity, in which we do all throughout the year IVF free for people, laparoscopic surgery free for people, and urinary incontinence free. Now, the point is, people have to know this facility is available. Similarly, ESAR has certain number of IVF which can be done per year. So our idea was to join with companies. I was talking with seniors of various companies and reach. We have 28 state chapters. So we interact at patient level, that infertility and IVF is not synonymous, number one. Make them understand what it is. Even if it is IVF, explain them IVF. And at the end of the day, you have to tell that you always feel it is costly, but there are centers which has dedicated some number of cases per month which are free or at a price which they can afford. So I think so companies can play an important role. We are going to have a lot of direct talks with patients, because what happens is we have innumerable webinars wherein in last 4 months I have addressed 28,000 consultants from America, ASHRI, ASRM, Europe, AAGL. Now what happens is 6,000 plus I had to address for COVID. Now that 6,000 which I address is more important than 28,000. So that is exactly what I'm trying to tell every state, whether it is ESAR or whether it's any other organization of fertility. Subsequently, of course, Foxy is always there. But the idea is you take into consideration, you have 200 patients or couples who are addressed on what is infertility, what is a normal issue, what is the percentage, how you can avoid it, then what are the simple treatment, what else. And then there is 30-40 minutes audience question answer, because patients don't get up. I'll give you a very good example. Rishikesh may have a little idea. When I was a vice president of Foxy, I had a movement known as Freedom from Infertility. And in that, on I think so, some August 14th or 15th, I called all our ART pregnancy, that as a gratitude to the couple on their confidence to us. So we felicitated them and the kids. There is a school next to our hospital, Gurukul. That whole school was filled with children. And they were feeling so, and we didn't do any big scientific talk. People who wanted to become pregnant, they were also present. Everybody doesn't want to share, because many people are very popular. So we kept it to themselves, but the program went for 3.5 hours or more, and patients and kids didn't want to leave. Then we did a similar program in Surat, similar program somewhere else. But what happens is, those awareness programs which are once in a year, once in a while, has to become like a routine in different states. So for example, we have 200, 300 people wherein there are 4 or 5 patients who are telling their small success story, because you can't keep very long talks also, because no patient wants to give a long talk. But what Rishikesh is pointing out is absolutely correct. There is a big lacuna that patients don't know that many good centers are available. If you go and ask them, okay, at your place it may be this much, but this is what my expectation is. So very often we ask, what is your, like yesterday's patient which I told, he collected some money borrowing from somewhere. We did one IVF cycle, didn't work. So now next cycle he could not afford. So I immediately told them, you don't have to worry, your next cycle is free by us. So now see, the person yesterday was feeling so happy because nobody is going to do a cycle free. See, eventually at Rishikesh is pointing out, you have different sources of fertility practice. Simple fertility, IVF, I have endoscopy, incontinence, obstetrics, sonography, cesarean section. So you have to consider a patient who needs a laparoscopic hysterectomy, which is difficult, but she can spend 40,000. We just use our skill, so we don't tell them no. So that lag, what he was trying to tell, that lag can be merged by companies organizing patient awareness on fertility issues. We don't tell infertility, on understanding fertility. So people are going for a proactive statement rather than a negative thing. Then it may extend to reducing abortion. Now you have to understand, as much as there was a problem about people not getting proper, or you will be surprised that in COVID time, the number of abortions we have done is almost, in 3.5 months, it's equal to 3 years what we did in the past. So you have to understand that there are some logistics which are changing, and a pandemic like this shakes all the industries, brings us back to grassroots. And when 2021, when we bounce back, as people were telling, when you have reduced capacity, you bounce back triple the time. Because see, even companies also have to have the products which are getting used. We want people to utilize the facility and become pregnant at a good time rather than come at a bad time. So I think so a lot can be done together between companies, us, and leaders and infertility practitioners. Then we add government to it, because government is always welcome, because as he rightly pointed out, if they say, okay, standard 60,000, 50,000 will give, there is a card available, etc., etc., there are so many people who will be ready. And all of us are ready to work for dreams. We always say that we live in the eyes of the dreams of our infertile couple. Once the dreams are fulfilled, then we feel, okay, we have done something big. Whereas removal of uterus, removal of fibroid is just a mechanical job. Satisfaction comes year in year.
Thank you so much, Dr. Trivedi, and you are definitely the work which you are highlighting, and the need where we need to do more is definitely awareness, where we can bring in this whole fertility discussion more, to the masses, as so that they can start understanding it, and then also as a progression of that, which can also lead, right kind of nudges or pressure to the other part of the stakeholders as well. Dr. Neena, so we are going to close this session shortly. So I'll get quick remarks from Dr. Neena and also Dr. Neena. My question is: we see so much of prevalence when it comes to fertility related issues or infertility as a problem among our people. Does the government, and since you belong to a government premier institution or the premier institution of the government, how do the government or the policymakers look at this whole issue?
Thank you, Kamal. I think I will just I will take from Dr. Rishi's suggestions and ideas, because he's going to be the FOGSI president in the coming 2 years. And I think my answer would answer both. See, I'm not in the policy, I'm not in the government, but I think I have knocked the doors of government right from 2010. And I've talked to the health secretaries at that time. What's very important is that, as I told you, IVF infertility, or that matter fertility, let's not put it infertility, fertility treatment is not on any of our national health policies. If you look at our national health policies, it doesn't, because they think family planning as an agenda. They don't realize that it is not family planning, it is planning for the family. So we have to change that term family planning to planning for the family. That means every woman, every couple has a child, to at least have one child. That should be, even if not two, at least one. That's one important thing. Now, Rishi said that we look at PPP mode. I will say that the government has done beautiful on the PPP mode when it comes in terms of radiology. If you look at it, states of Gujarat, states of Rajasthan, states of Haryana, where on a PPP mode, they provided radiology services for CT scan, MRI, which are not affordable in the private sector, and that done wonderful. The government has also initiated IVF in the PPP mode. And I know of colleagues in West Bengal, in UP, who came to us, took our tender, took our MOUs and the way we worked and put it. And I'm sad to say 5 years from now, they have not. The government just offers them that PP things. But then when it comes to the policy, moving the files, the kind of hard work, and I'm sure Rishi, I don't want to name people who have worked and who've gone, but ultimately they all go under the carpet. We don't know how the files move. Yes, what's very important is if our colleagues, as Rishi and Prakash say, that if we give the services 60,000, all inclusive or maybe a little bit extra, I'm sure the government will also be happy. I think there needs to be an initiative, not from just our side. We also have to go as stakeholders to the government to push it. There's another thing which I would suggest. See, I'm the secretary for an organization called the Indian Fertility Society for 2 years. And before I took over, I was literally looking at the British Fertility Society and I was looking at associate societies from Europe. See, we have verticals, which I don't know whether ESAR has, but IFS doesn't have. We don't have a vertical called a vertical of charity. A vertical which will be absolutely tax-free, where we can really work up. And who gives a charity? A person who gives charity would definitely get a lot of tax benefit. I'm sure every company has a CSR. If we all think, I think that's what Foxy can do. We can build up a vertical where the donations, I know there are a lot of, I don't know those words. If that kind of a funding comes, where it's not just a CSR coming from big corporate offices, but even from individuals, which gets them a tax benefit, I'm sure that a lot of people will come forward. But then at the end of the day, when we get that funding, we have to have a body which justifies who's needing. So, we have to have our criteria, and that way, at least as organizations who are non-profit organizations can also look forward. I know it's going to be a tall order when we say to the government, yes, because government will never have fertility or infertility as an agenda, but slowly as Ayushman Bharat comes, if they've made a move, I think we should be optimistic. So by the time things move, can we not, as organization of ESAR, Foxy, IFS, get us to have a vertical, which is a vertical of charity, which comes not under our, it is in a different gamut and a different thing, and we can help patients, at least with the minimal. And I'm sure a lot of companies would come forward for this.
Very good suggestion. Very good.
Kamal, one second. And Nina, we have 1 crore which is received from Dr. Sadhana Desai, which is the fund from where we can do free infertility, free IVF treatment. So there are people who can, obviously there are many organizations. So what you're telling, those verticals are available and they can be created. The other point is critical.
Sir, Dr. ESAR is lucky to have Dr. Sadhana Desai. What about other organizations? And I'm sure when Rishi is going to head 30,000 gynecologists, he can push in much more. Am I right, Rishi? You will be...
In fact,
much
more, Nina, it's a
dynamic
suggestion. What I was thinking was that, that is what I was thinking, that all our farmers have got a CSR fund.
Yes.
Why are they giving this CSR fund to some village and all? Why can't this CSR fund be given for doing free healthcare? I can't understand this. If you have a turnover of, say, 5,000 crores and 5% of 5,000 crores is 25 crores, or God knows how much is 5,000 25 to 50 crores. Why can't we get that money and use it and then fund it to give the cost of the surgery at 50,000 or 60,000? I'm sure it will be a win-win situation rather than you giving it to some PCD somewhere in some village, some project which has no relevance. But for us, it doesn't have relevance. You are in the pharma field. Why can't you do it, Dr. Sanjeev?
Dr. Pai, so let me get in here first. Very noble suggestion made by Dr. Nina, and definitely, and as Dr. Trivedi is already saying, and he has been emphasizing on it, that there is already, this kind of effort being done by ESAR, and I'm sure that these efforts can be further, reinforced, further, taken forward to make sure that there is a more uniform kind of support is available from all those sections of the society who can contribute to it. We at ISW Council also, just to highlight your point, Dr. Pai, we try to encourage organizations from across the board to invest their CSR fund in health impact. And for that, to encourage them in the right direction, and as we believe that, as you are mentioning, that rather than spending CSR fund in many other things, if spent in health, can bring better outcomes and can be more useful for the people for whom it is being used. So we have been doing an initiative for last 4 years now called CSR Health Impacts Awards, under which we have been recognizing many organizations who have been investing their fund in the area of health. So, Mr. Nawangul, a quick remark from you, and then I'll close.
Just two very quick points. I think on the basis of what has been said, I just now commit 10 lakh rupees from my CSR fund to whichever fund is appropriate from a CSR fund. So let it start. So I don't want to even say that let us do something and let us talk and let us discuss. I am committing immediately some small fund at least to start off this as a process. Secondly, I think with my experience that I have seen in peritoneal dialysis, in tuberculosis, patients who survive this or patients who take treatment talk a lot about it, come out in the open and really help the movement. So we will have to work with this set of eminent doctors to find a way that we get successful IVF couples to come out and talk about what happiness it has given to them and make it a movement in a much better fashion. So both we can do. And you can see I'm going to respond to everything in a way that we do something about it rather than keep talking. So let's do it.
Thank you.
Wonderful, Nawangulji, and it's a very, very welcome step. And the important aspect that this session it's very heartening that it's ending with a certain steps being taken, maybe a small step, but I'm sure it will be kind of snowball into much larger actions when it comes to understanding and handling compassionately the problem of almost 30 million people of our country who are suffering from the childlessness. And IVF, we are not saying is the panacea for all, but definitely is one stream which helps some of them for sure. But at the same time, there is a need to understand the limitations of IVF and the potentials of IVF. And thank you so much, Dr. Pai, Dr. Trivedi, Dr. Neena Malhotra, and Sanjeevji for connecting us with us this morning. And we look forward from ISW Council also to contribute in whatever manner we can contribute to this discourse of bringing support to these people who are in a way disadvantaged because their problems are not being looked into a holistic manner. So thank you so much.